Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and I was asked a very interesting question on X/Twitter, and I would like to reply publicly. So the question was asked by a Twitter user by the name of Elijah the Middleborn, and he has almost 10,000 followers on Twitter, on Twix. Anyways, here we are. Let's see the question. Hey, pure Metatron, are there sources that say Romans did this? And if so, do they provide information on how they achieved it? And the it being, saw someone say the Romans used to make rudi, so that's the wooden gladius or wooden gladi that were used for training purposes by Roman legionaries and in general Roman forces, that were twice the weight of a gladius, and I have thoughts. Okay, yeah, I'll respond to that, but let's keep reading. How the heck are you making wood twice as heavy as iron or steel? That is a fair question. Is it just a freaking branch? I use a dense, heavy wood, and it's barely the weight of a gladius when I do not shaping at all. Okay, so it's a very, very good question. I'm going to address every point, of course. We're going to be methodical about it. I will provide a few sources. But first, let me read a few of the answers down here as well for complete context. And then VBC Apologetics says that sounds like an internet exaggeration that said, or an ancient exaggeration, you do have to keep those in mind, that said maybe drilling the handle and filling it with lead. Interesting idea, but unless the sources mention that, or we find one like this, or there is a piece of iconography that could lead to that, then it becomes complete speculation. He responds, it was one of the historical YouTubers, but I've seen quite a few of us have mentioned this, but I've seen the claim a lot, and after a year of making wooden swords from wood, that so he makes wooden swords. That's nice. I'll have to, can you make me a rudis? I'll pay you for it. From wood that is heavier and more dense than anything in Europe, I'm calling BS. Do keep in mind that wood density changes from modern period to classical antiquity to the Middle Ages. An example of that is ash in the medieval period, which we know was heavier and denser than it is today, but I'll go deeper on that on the actual answer. So the solution to this would be to read the sources, but the problem is that people don't read the sources directly in Latin. So here is what we find usually in English, but there is a mistake, and that's what's creating this problem. So let me address it. In a lot of different places, this is what we read. So we're reading from Vegetius, book 1, and in the post-exercise section, we are told that they gave their recruits round bucklers woven with willows, twice as heavy as those used on real service. And I actually really don't like the word buckler here because it does actually say scuta in Latin, as we'll see, but whatever. And wooden swords double the weight of the common ones. They exercised them with these at the post both morning and afternoon. So you read this, you're like, oh, they're giving them rudis, but they're double weight. How is it possible? That's the problem. English is the problem. This isn't translated correctly. And it doesn't matter which version of the Rei Militaris you read that is in English, that's what you find. Let's jump into the Latin. Okay, so I'll put a link if you want to read this and you're like, but wait, Metatron, I don't know Latin. It's fine. Just take it, take the section, copy paste it into Google Translate, and you'll be fine. But here I'll do it for you so I can be a little more. So we are on book 1, Liber 1, and section 11. So Vegetius is telling us about what the ancients were writing in books, and we read, Scuta de vimine, shields made of wicker, duplum pondus gratis aberet. So double the weight. So we are having shields made of wicker that are double weight as compared to the regular issued scuta used by legionaries normally. My lead researcher actually had one of these because he does living history. He had one of these made, double weight, absolutely doable with wicker. Now, look at this. Idemque. This means in the same way, clauas ligneas. This does not mean sword. And that's that it's not using rudis. You do find rudis, by the way, in this entire book a couple of times, and because it's talking about the training. But in this specific issue, in this specific section, it's not calling it rudis. It's calling it clauas ligneas. And then it tells us dupli aeque ponderis pro gladis. So it has the double weight of the gladius, gladi. So what is a clauas ligneas? You can translate it in English as a slat, S-L-A-T, not with a U, like a piece of wood, maybe a club could be a good translation. These are wooden clubs. These are not, the double weight ones are wooden clubs or slats that are used to train at the palos, the stake. These are not used for combat. The rudis are used for full contact sparring by the legionaries, and those will be in fact lighter than regularly issued gladi. about 300 grams most likely. These are two different implements. The ones that are double are clauas. But now that we have established this, what about the weight? Can you make these double weight of a metal gladius? Absolutely. Because remember, a metal gladius is around 500 to 800 grams in weight historically, which means that all you need to do is to create a wooden club that is about 1.5 kilograms. Absolutely doable. Absolutely doable, considering the fact that these do not need to have necessarily the shape of a rudis, because they are not rudis. This is the crux of the matter. It's a translation mistake, imprecision in the English versions, but once you have access to the original Latin, you immediately spot, oh, it's a clauas. In Italian, it's very simple for me to pick it up, because clava lignea is how I would say it in Italian, clauas ligneas. It's very similar. To me, it just sounds, oh, of course, it's a clava. It's a freaking clava. If you're Italian, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But even if you're not, it's a wooden club. That's what they use, that they're double weight, and they only use them ad palos, morning and afternoon, to build up the muscle. So rather than just calling it for BS, read the sources in Latin first, is my suggestion in this case. Not trying to attack. I'm just saying, next time, I think I would suggest to do this. Because your experience that you have described, making wooden gladi for a year, is absolutely coherent with the sources. Because, yeah, they were 300 grams around, and they used them, the actual rudis were used for full contact sparring. Though double ones are for the palos, the stake training. There is a whole article that I will link down below that actually talks about whether or not, from a modern perspective, scientifically, it actually does make sense to train with double weapon, like double shield, double sword. Would you actually have benefits? And the reality is, it's a little bit contested, it's a little bit debated. It seems like it's not a great idea. This, of course, doesn't mean that the ancients didn't believe it. There could be a placebo aspect to it. Many practitioners of sword art praise the use of training with a much heavier weapon than their normal one. The general argument is that doing so is good for conditioning as well as to train more explosive speed when switching back to the normal weighted sword. Certainly, this attitude can be historically justified. Vegetius wrote of using heavier weapons to train against targets in 4th century Rome. I appreciate that he does specify target here because, as we see, that's exactly what we're talking about. And even on the other half of the hemisphere, the Japanese sometimes use a heavier wooden sword called a suborito for strength training. There is a strong case to be made, however, that this method causes more harm than good. In fact, data shows that a practitioner may be better off doing the exact opposite and train with a weapon that is lighter than the normal one. So with this, I'd like to say, I personally think there is nothing wrong with what Vegetius suggests, but I would, of course, only use it, as he says, to train at the freaking stake. So if I'm doing sparring, if I'm doing full contact, and if I'm doing anything else really with a sword, I would use either lighter ones or regular weight. And then he's talking about the loss of precision. And then there is a whole study about baseball. And now, I don't know how much this can translate to sword training in the military in ancient Rome, but it is an interesting read nonetheless. In baseball, so let's keep in mind this is a little bit of an outer topic, it is quite common to see players use weighted bats for the exact reason some swordsmen do. Similarly, they will sometimes use a normal weighted bat and tie it to a rubber exercise band for resistance to simulate a heavier one, something that some HEMA practitioners are now advising. Players also like to do this as a warm-up to prime their muscles right before going to bat during a game. On the surface, it seems to make sense that swinging a heavier bat or sword will make using a lighter one much easier, right? According to the research, the opposite is true. In fact, it is becoming the norm for baseball coaches to stop their players from doing this. Studies from the last couple of decades show that the benefits are all in the player's imagination. I don't know if they're all in the player's imagination, but then again, in the book Motor Learning and Performance, authors Richard A. Schmidt and Timothy D. Lee talk about the findings. So let's read this. 8 baseball and softball players accepted 3 sets of 15 bats swinging, during which they hit a ball suspended on a cord. Batters performed the first 5 swings and last 5 swings in each set with a regular, non-weighted bat, and the middle 5 swings with a weighted bat. They were asked to estimate swing speed at bat weight, compared with the speed and weight they perceived during the first 5 unweighted swings. Following the 5th weighted swing, and after the first, third and fifth unweighted swings. Actual swing speed did not increase following swings with a weighted bat, but batters perceived their swings to be faster and their bats to feel lighter. Yeah, that's the placebo aspect of it. For 5 of the 8 participants, this illusion lasted for at least 4 unweighted swings. In another study, Sutter and Groomer 2003, the normal swing pattern of experienced batters was found to be altered, and their swing speed slower down for up to 5 swings following a warm-up with a weighted bat. The results of these studies suggest that batters would be better off taking warm-up. Yeah, okay, so this is to me, it's interesting, but it's absolutely inconclusive because, first, it's too small. Like, you do 15 swings is nothing. You need to train for 6 months as a Roman legionary and then see, because that's, I think, what they were doing. I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but I'm saying it's not a good example of what Vegetius was saying, because if you use this wooden club we have discussed and you do it for months, you'll build up muscle. And I don't think it will influence how effective or precise you are when you use the actual weapon, because when they fight, they're using the rudis. So I do think that after a few months, there could be some benefits in the sense that you could build up some muscle by doing that. Now, whether or not that's the optimal way of doing it, that's what we can discuss, I suppose. I'm sure that some of the training would actually help to build up the muscle, but the idea that there are actually better and more efficient ways to do it, well explained here by the author, Bill Grandy. Once again, this doesn't mean that Vegetius was full of it. It could very well mean that it's something that they thought that it really worked. Because you do get a feeling, like if any of you have ever tried this, is take a couple of dumbbells and try to punch with them for like 5 minutes and then put them down and try to punch. Yes, you'll be faster. But then again, that kind of goes away. So scientifically, maybe explosive speed and strength. I mean, at the end of the day, if you do movement, it's going to be good for you. No matter what you do, but how great of a technique it is scientifically, that's maybe the part that we can discuss. And even though he presents quite a few examples, it's interesting that he does say, as we can read, one could even make an argument that the few existing longswords and rapiers in museums seem to be exceptionally lightweight. Of course, he's moving it into the Middle Ages now, and this could show that people favored lighter training tools. This data, of course, needs to be taken with a large grain of salt, as the sample size of surviving training weapons is too small to draw large-scale conclusions. He's absolutely right. And then he says it does, however, show that lighter training weapons were certainly in existence and that modern people cannot say that lighter training weapons are not period correct. He's absolutely right, and we demonstrated with the sources, actually, that they did use the lighter training weapons for combat. They only used the heavy ones for stake training to build muscle. I mean, that's what they were doing. And of course here he's mentioning Vegetius, the 4th century, advised using heavier weapons for training, and one might argue that if our ancestors did it, then so should we. Well, yeah, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, this would be cherry-picking historical evidence, I agree, yeah. Use steel bar or rod for a core, sleeve it in sections of wood glued together and then shape the sections around it maybe. Yeah, but once again, Jag, this is all speculation unless we know that that's what they did, and no Roman mention says that these wooden rudi had a metal core. So there's no reason to think that. Then again, fill the core with lead, ... Yes, Matt, but oh goodness gracious, if we don't have evidence of them doing it, it's a void point. That's a lot of extra work when you can just make a heavier steel sword. True, Elijah, but then again, let's keep in mind that these are used for training. And if you have a wooden sword, it's still a wooden sword. So it's gonna be safer to use than a metal sword, even if it's dull. So it is also possible that even though, yes, you could indeed make a heavier metal sword, maybe they went for wood simply because a metal sword is still considered too heavy, because if you get hit with a dull metal sword on the temple, you could still crack it. You could still do some injuries that make the soldiers unfit for combat, unfit for training. And given, yes, you could do that with wood too, but in my opinion, wood is definitely safer than any form of metal for training purposes. In fact, someone says training sword, you would probably want your training weapon to be at least as heavy as the actual thing to help you build up strength and endurance, but without the sharp edges while you're learning how to handle it. Yes, I still think that it's better to train with wood than it is to train with swords, even if they are made of metal, even without the edges, because a sword is still a very, very... And by the way, you can cut with a dull sword. I would like to underline, you're not going to clean cut with a dull sword, but you will cut. I have experience on that. I actually, by mistake, I was using a dull sword, During a filming, I hit a friend of mine in a way that I wasn't supposed to, and it cut him a little bit. It wasn't much, it was a little cut, but it did cut. Then again, fill the core with lead, ... Yes, Matt, but oh goodness gracious, if we don't have evidence of them doing it, it's a void point. In fact, Elijah correctly says, there's not an easy thing though. It takes work, and if you're using it as a practice sword, it would severely compromise the build. I agree. Everyone says lead core, petrified. That's pretty cool. The alternative is a Minecraft sword. Hey, I'll take that, Matt. Alright, so let's address every single point and answer the question properly. Also, thank you again, Elijah, for asking it. Vegetius that still deal with weight. So weight was absolutely something that the Romans used to their advantage to train their soldiers. For instance, we read in Vegetius 1:19, the young soldier must be given frequent practice in carrying loads of up to 60 pounds while marching at the normal speed. This is because on difficult campaigns they will have to carry their rations as well as their weapons. So yeah, as you can see, get the soldiers used to a heavier load, whether it be weapons or whether it be the regular equipment that they're carrying around, and then that will be advantageous for a more efficient military when deployed. And clearly the physicality of these soldiers is very important, as we read, because he's talking about, once again, Vegetius, a young soldier should have alert eyes and should hold his head upright. The recruit should be broad-chested with powerful shoulders and brawny arms. Even the fingers. So it's not just a matter of training, but even a matter of what are we starting with. And it's interesting that Vegetius once again even mentions the jobs, like someone was doing a job before being enlisted. Well, you know, people that were using their hands, like smiths, carpenters, or smiths for obvious reasons, that would be great, but smiths, carpenters, butchers, hunters of deer and wild boar, these are the most suitable, he says. While the least suitable would be fishermen, bird catchers, sweet makers, weavers, and he says all those who do the kind of jobs that women normally do should be kept away from the army. Okay, but I hope that you enjoyed this dive into the concept of rudis in ancient Rome. This is my answer to it. Feel free to agree or disagree. Of course, let me know in the comments. But I hope that you liked the video, and if you did, please remember thumbs up. And if you're not yet a member of this community, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much.